Projects Community meeting. We're going to go ahead and get started in another moment. We're just making a couple of changes to interpretation, and then we'll get started.
Buenas noches a todos. Vamos a dar inicio a esta sesión en un momento. Todos estamos esperando que alguna gente se conecte.
Okay, I think we're ready. Michelle, I believe we're ready to go.
Michelle, would you allow me to record?
Yes.
Actually, Michelle, you put me in the interpreter channel.
Okay, you guys can go ahead and start.
Okay, thank you for your patience. Good evening. Third time's a charm. Welcome to our Washington Area Program of Projects Virtual Community Meeting. Happy holidays, December 14th of 2021, it appears. So welcome. Thank you for being here and joining us this evening. Beth, next slide. So for our meetings, we provide Spanish interpretation. So again, you need to be connected to a tablet or a computer. In a moment, there will be a globe icon in the bottom right of your screen. It is not appearing just yet, but it will. You need to select the language of your preference. And even if English is your preferred language, you do need to select English as your preferred language.
Hello. Becky.
Buenas noches a todos. Si hacen el favor de poner atención a la pantalla, y es necesario que todo el mundo seleccione el canal de interpretación, ya sea en español o en inglés, para escuchar, pulse el globo, el icono del globo de interpretación y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. We're good to go, Anthony.
Thank you, gracias. And if everyone can take a moment to select the language of their choice. And while we're doing that, Beth will go ahead and go to the next slide. So for this evening's meeting, we're going to provide a couple of updates, a look ahead, but a bulk of the meeting is going to be spent on the Washington area connectivity study and a discussion that's going to be led by Beth Vogelsang. But before we do that, we have some really exciting news to share from Jenna with the Mayor's Office of the National Western Center. She's going to give a brief update about the 51st Avenue Bridge, and then our principal project manager, Eric Brackey, is going to provide some exciting news about Washington Street. And then after we'll do that, we'll dive right after those two brief presentations, we will jump right into the connectivity study discussion. So with that, why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide and turn it over to Jenna Espinosa.
Thanks, Anthony, and good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me tonight. We have some pretty exciting news as it relates to the 51st Avenue Bridge. We continue making tremendous progress, making that connection from the National Western Center campus to the Globeville neighborhood as our first connection point to the Globeville neighborhood. We always start with this slide just as a reminder of the different assets that were outlined in the 2015 master plan. Of course, everything that you see in color here is considered parts of phases 1 and 2, which is currently under construction. So of course, just right next to number 4 there, which is National Western Drive, is 51st Avenue Bridge, which will ultimately connect to the Globeville neighborhood and to Washington Street eventually. So very exciting. With that, we'll go to the next slide so I can show you a couple of updated photos. So this one was taken on October 11th, so it's a little bit dated. Even more progress has been made, or significant progress has been made, I should say. We're really gearing up for the 2022 stock show. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback on my end. But we have, anywhere from about 700 to over 1,000 workers on site right now. So as you can imagine, things are extremely busy out at our site. Just trying to tie up some loose ends before we welcome hundreds of thousands of people to the campus in a couple of weeks. And we'll really be able to display a lot of our new assets in our first new building. You'll see in this picture, the SYEC stands for the Stockyards Event Center. And then just north of it are the associated stockyards, and both of those will be showcased and debuted during next year's stock show. So we're really excited about that. If we go to the next slide, we can, I think, see a couple of updated photos. Yeah, this one was taken just about a week ago. So you can see the bridge landing that we've carved out near National Western, or just off of National Western Drive. And we have the columns in the water that will ultimately hold up the bridge. And then we're tracking toward January for the bridge girders, or the beams that will go across the bridge and actually make up what is the 51st Avenue Bridge. So a lot of that work will be, kind of on display for stock show goers, which will be actually very exciting. So I hope you all are planning to attend this year's stock show and can kind of see all of the work that we have been doing to date. So with that, we'll go to the next one. This was taken probably about a month and a half ago. These steel beams were placed inside the river, creating a cofferdam, which ultimately makes just a dry surface for our contractors to be able to put those columns into the water that I was just telling you about. And then there are those columns that they were able to carve out once those cofferdams were made. So this one is really exciting. It was taken just a couple of days ago. So you can see the bridge really come into life. And next up are those girders or beams that will be placed on top of those columns and then create the actual bridge and connection point. So and then this is another good aerial of just all of the different work that we've had going on over the last couple of months. And of course, that riverfront area that has long been inaccessible. We have successfully moved over 3 miles of rail and a significant portion of the Delgany Interceptor wastewater pipes. We have moved both of those and undergrounded the Delgany wastewater wastewater pipes to ensure that we can now create that access to the South Platte Riverfront. So all of that is very exciting news and progress to show. I think this is the last slide. So with that, I will just conclude with a couple of impacts that we are tracking. Of course, we still have the detour to the South Platte River Trail, and that has been in effect since early October, and we do anticipate that lasting until May. And then in addition to that, we have just a relatively small water impact. It should last for about 12 hours, and we're tracking toward this Saturday for that. But it'll be a water outage, and it's impacting 5 businesses, but we've been in very close contact with them. And all 5 of those businesses have pretty minimal workers on site on Saturdays. So hopefully we're keeping those impacts to a minimum. But if you have any questions on any of that, I'm happy to either take those now, or you're more than welcome to reach out to me at any point. I'm happy to share my contact information with this group. So again, thanks for having me tonight, and hopefully see you next month.
Great, thank you, Jenna, and thank you for putting your email in the chat. And if anyone has any questions specific to anything related to the National Western Center, please feel free to reach out to Jenna at any given time. We'll continue to have her at our CAG meetings and community meetings, because there is a lot that is happening at the campus as they gear up for the 2022 stock show, but also just the continued construction on the site in 2022 as well. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eric Brackey with Dottie.
Thanks, Anthony. Wanted to share some exciting news tonight. As many of you know, the budget for the Washington Street project has always been incredibly tight. The city took the initiative in the spring to apply for what's called a RAISE grant, and RAISE stood for Rebuilding America's Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. It's a new name for an old grant program through the United States Department of Transportation. Some of you might know it as Tiger grants from years past, or a Build grant. They changed the name this year. It's an incredibly competitive program, and only 2 projects in Colorado got funded. And that's pretty typical for the RAISE grant itself. One was a rehabilitation project in southern Colorado of old Santa Fe Super Chief line. And the second was $14 million awarded to Washington Street. We are incredibly excited about this. There's a news release that's a press release that's going to go out here within the next few days, but we wanted this group to be the first to know that we were successful. Over the course of the next few months, we'll be working with Federal Highway Administration to work out all the grant details and how to administer this grant and jump through all the hoops that we'd have to jump through with a federal program. So pretty nice to have $14 million infused into this project. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer it.
Great. I don't know if we saw any, Eric. Beth, did you see any?
No, I see some clapping hands. So that's
yes. Great.
And also, Anthony, if you're able to keep your chat open, I think when I'm sharing, I can't open it.
Got it. Okay, I think mine will be open. And then I also wanted to welcome, and not put her on the spot, but if she wanted to say a few words, I noticed that I believe Councilwoman Candace Sedabaka has joined us this evening. If she wanted to say a few words, I always want to provide that opportunity for her if she would like to. Okay. Just always, you've always tried to make sure we acknowledge our elected officials. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and we're going to begin our in-depth after Beth presents some information and some slides, we're going to be having a discussion. And so Beth, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a great segue. So we're going to have money, more money for our Washington Street design, and that will get moving forward, which is super exciting. And it also is a key spine to our whole Washington area connectivity. So, so all in all, it's all coming together pretty nicely. So I wanted to just kind of go back. Now, the last time that we were together and talked about this was late spring. And so while we had hoped to bring this issue back to you, this study over the summer and in the fall, we did have some other projects that were really a little more pressing. And so we wanted to kind of put them to the front, and we're just getting a chance to come back on this now. So I'm going to share with you tonight some of the connectivity discussion that we've been having, and also just letting you know up front that I would love for you to participate in this conversation tonight. And also we will try to get this posted online in a way that you can go in and leave comments. Okay, so just kind of know that going into it. But if you recall, this was our study area for this connectivity work, and it's all of Globeville and Elyria Sponsia. And the idea behind it is to develop a cohesive planning vision for an interconnected, walkable, and safe mobility network. So that's what we're really trying for. And there have been many projects studied. So with these, we're not starting from scratch. We're building on a lot of the previous efforts, including specifically the Globeville Neighborhood Plan, for one. And as we're looking for ways to make sure that our private investments in the area coincide with our public investments, so that everything is playing together nicely. And we're going to talk some about immediate improvements and longer term visionary improvements. So just keep that in mind as we go. So one of the things that we've always talked about with you guys is that this study area right here is actually quite burdened by a lot of barriers. And this includes the river itself as a crossing, although we're making progress at 51st. It includes the railroads that have been there historically. And I know last time we shared quite a bit more history with you. And of course, the highways, which are a huge impediment. And you know, both highways, I-70 and I-25. So when we think about connectivity in this area, we have to not only get across these barriers and kind of undo the impact of all these barriers, but we also have to think about what those barriers do to our community. So these yellow blobs just sort of illustrate the idea that because we have so many barriers, we have pockets to our neighborhood. You know, we have parts of our neighborhood, the part south of I-70 and the part north, the part west of I-25 Fox Station versus the part to the east. And so as we are building this connectivity system, we need it to improve mobility.
Hold on, Freddie, come talk to me.
But we also need it to re-stitch the community, right? To relink these parts of our neighborhood that are disjointed because of these barriers. So that's the goal. That's the purpose of what we're going to be looking at. And we're gonna try to walk through this with you and hopefully hear some ideas from you guys as well. Okay. So keep this picture in mind about not only building connections, but stitching together community parts that are a result of this connection. So I'm just gonna close that. So when we met with you last time, we had asked you a few questions and we asked you, what do you see as the biggest or most critical gaps? And without a doubt, sidewalks came back as the #1 issue. And so I know that since the time we talked to you, Karen has brought a number of sidewalk updates. And so we can know that those are moving forward and progress is getting made. And then you also mentioned things like 38, because that's a challenging underpass, hard to walk there. Different things, residential, the rail itself, creating safe walking opportunities, connecting and having maybe improved crossings. So these were all the types of things that you guys wanted us to think about as we thought about connectivity. And then we also asked you what other aspects of connectivity are important. So safe sidewalks on 44th and 45th, but generally also just safe sidewalks. Placemaking that honors this history of the neighborhood and the residents. So that idea that that we're a place, not just a series of land uses, you know, that have to deal with these barriers. Safe pedestrian and bicycle access to goods and services, equity considerations, which of course are huge when we start talking about infrastructure investments. 45th Avenue as historic Globeville Main Street, and the idea that let's have more main streets, let's make our streets friendly and inviting and comfortable. And then you asked us to think through some of the icons of major destinations. So we have certainly started to roll those destinations into this thinking about connectivity. Last but not least, we said, is there anything else you want us to be thinking about? And the plaza and gathering space idea was a big one that came out, but that was really one of the main ideas that people wanted us to consider as we talked about this. So just a reminder, you know, we do have gaps in our sidewalk system. Of course, you guys all know this very well. And these are the projects that are currently underway. And so for tonight, we're We're not going to talk too specifically about more sidewalks, although I'm happy to take comments and ideas. But right now, this is the status of the sidewalk work. And the bicycle network also, which is in Denver Moves and highlights some of the things you see marked in dashes. These are many of the proposed bicycle improvements. And right now, the three that will be coming back to you next year for discussion and to discuss further are 51st, which is a paving project that is currently a little bit delayed because of the railroad crossing. So there's some details there that are being worked out. The Lincoln Street Bikeway, which will extend all the way down past Gardens Place Elementary to 44th. And there'll be some design discussion coming next year to talk through that. And East 45th, the main street there, and how they can deal with bikes and parking and all the components of that street. So just a reminder that those are also important and they are part of this picture, and we'll be coming back to you next year after the first of the year. Okay, so that brings us to the stuff we want to talk to you guys about. So this map illustrates essentially the existing and planned network. And by that, it means the things like 51st that are not only planned, but moving through design and now through construction. So National Western Drive, of course, I think we just saw pictures, it's fully constructed. Ideas for Betty Cram and Betty Cram as it extends into the triangle area. So some of these are dashed. The idea is this is a planned connection, that there would be a connection, but the details may still be forthcoming. We have 51st to Lincoln, of course, 44th. These streets over here are dashed simply because they are recommended planned improvements in the box area next step study, but they are not currently in design or construction. So still a ways off and still details of which to be forthcoming. But that's the idea. So we wanted to kind of build this out for you on the Elyria Esponcia side. We build off of Brighton, of course, and we have improvements and centered around the 47th Avenue pedestrian bridge, of course, York and Clayton as two major crossings that take you down to 40th Avenue and the community just south of 40th Avenue. So this is sort of what our network currently looks like. And the idea behind this study is that we would add to this network some other suggested connections that really help pull it all together and make it work better. So this is where you guys come in. We're going to walk you through some of these other suggested types of improvements, but we would really love to know any that you think are missing from this picture, and kind of just discuss them. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Fernando in my office is going to stop. He's going to pull up a working map of this so that we can talk and move through it and mark it up with people's ideas or suggestions, okay? So let's give him 1 second. Okay, so it's the same map, but I think we'll start on this northern end and we'll describe to you what you're seeing, but then please jump in and ask questions or say, hey, what about, you know? So if we just start up here, you know, this is 51st Avenue, the bridge we just went through, right? Washington will become a multimodal sidewalk and user-friendly street, okay? And we were thinking that some of this in here needs to be addressed. So the neighborhood plan, as well as some of the development work that is underway, identify the potential for 50th Avenue to carry all the way over from the river into and connect through the property on the west side of Washington. And potentially, we're noting here the opportunity for a bike ped connection over the rail and to the trail that is part of the platform open space. So in theory, you could be on this side of Globeville and you could take the trail and through platform open space and cross over the rail and make your way all the way to the South Platte River Trail at 50th there. And Fernando's just helping to highlight what we're talking about. So that being one of a new connection that is a possibility.
Hey, Beth, Brad had a question in the chat about.
Okay, great.
Maybe Brad, if you'd like to ask your question.
Sure, it was just really about the connectivity because I hadn't seen it until now, you know, how 50th was going to fit into this, but now I see that it is added to what I haven't seen before.
Okay, and I'll just take you through them, but then, you know, if this doesn't look right to you or there's questions, well, you know, that's what we want to talk about. So this is this is not a done map. We're not finished, and there's room here for input. Okay, please.
The other piece too, where 50th connects, I mean, I think into Argo Park, I've seen a couple of ideas here and it looks like it's on this map too, where Argo Park really kind of, that crossing at the train at Pearl.
Yes.
And 50th really kind of like becomes an access point for all of Globeville, which is great.
Yeah, thank you. So let's go through that one. So just to kind of keep going here, Pearl Street here is a right of way that would come back sort of to be usable with the redevelopment of that site. And the idea here is that instead of it just stopping at the bottom of that property, it would cross the tracks and be part of, kind of intersect with that, you know, this 48th Avenue Greenway, which the Greenway is part of the stormwater study that everyone's working on, and another project that we've brought to you guys and will continue to bring forward. Those options for creating stormwater management that is brought to the river, along with this bike and pedestrian connection from the South Platte River Trail. From the South Platte River Trail all the way across Washington, connecting and crossing the tracks there with Pearl, and then through Argo Park on trails and all the way up to Lincoln Street. So that would become a really great connection, both east-west for the Greenway, but available north-south along Pearl. So that's that idea. Let's just talk about 49th a little bit. So you'll see 49th at Washington there extends also through that property and to the tracks. And there is a potential for a crossing. Now, I will say that this is a roadmap, okay? And these are all the ideas that we want to make sure we capture. And will we get 3 crossings of the railroad? I don't know. That might be asking a bit much, but we want to make sure everything's on this map, okay? And then subsequently we'll talk with the railroad. But if we could cross the railroad at 49th, that also gives us a chance to reconnect the grid. So that's a possibility. And you'll note that the 49th doesn't extend eastward over to the river or the South Platte Trail, because that's Superior Farms. And so right now, Superior Farms is going to stay and manage that property, and we won't be cutting a road through the middle of that for public use. So that led us just north of Superior Farms to those little green dashes, which said, well, we can't really connect across Superior Farms, but perhaps as that area to the north changes and evolves, we can look to create bike and pedestrian connections through that space for public access to the river trail. We've in the levy work, they're assuming that there was opportunities for future connections to the trail there along the South Platte. So those dashed lines are representative of the idea that we should make sure that area remains bike and ped friendly and accessible through to the river in some manner, however that redevelops. And then we note, if you go north to Emerson and 52nd, those are sidewalk improvements and changes that are part of that 51st Avenue work that to get additional sidewalks in up there. So with that, let's see. Let's just kind of move to the south a little bit. then we'll probably have to switch maps. But if you move to the south a little bit in that area, you'll see that 49th extends all the way down to 47th, because 47th, is the road that is also accessible and crosses us over to the other side of Washington and into the National Western area, and provides opportunity for us to link up with this other dashed line that's coming out of Globeville Landing Park. And so this is an idea, and you'll see it's dashed, but it's dashed because it's in the National Western Center plan. It's in other community mobility plans, that there be some connection to that park. And so this is in there, and whether this lies exactly like this or not, but we don't want to lose that opportunity to tie whatever happens there at National Western and the Elyria Swansea side to a direct connection to the park and to the South Platte River Trail. So that's a big one we definitely don't want to lose, even though we don't know exactly how that will work yet. If we go back over west of Washington, you'll see that we've added this idea of Clark Place and this circle under I-70 and a continuation of Clark Place down to 44th. Now, I met with some folks at the beginning of this study who were very interested in reopening that pedestrian tunnel underneath I-70 that had been closed when CDOT was doing that highway work years ago. I don't remember the date. And I know there were flooding concerns with that tunnel. And so the opportunity to open that would only come if we were able to address the flooding concerns first. But if you recall, when we were working on Fox Station area and even the Globeville stormwater study, there are some pipe improvements and some changes that would reduce the flooding that comes up through this area significantly, and potentially create a situation where this tunnel could be opened again. And so we're putting this on the books as another option for folks to be able to move north-south through the neighborhood on a safe street in a comfortable environment and cross under 70 without having to, say, walk along Washington or something. I might just stop for a second. Does anybody have ideas or questions or anything that you think is missing from this part of the map? Okay, I see AE, it looks like you've joined us, and I see a quick note, and I lost it. Can someone read that for me? Hey,
Yes,
you jump in.
Yeah, where on the planning timeline is public input to advance review of the concern regarding how installing bike lanes on Lincoln will impact parking for Lincoln Street residents? Related to this is Broadway being looked at as an alternative to Lincoln in the bike lane network?
Yeah, that is a great question. So right now, I'm not showing Broadway, this is true. But the Lincoln Street Bikeway project will be coming back after the first of the year and sharing some of their design work and looking for that input. And we certainly, if you have thoughts or concerns, we certainly can forward those to that team at this time. But they are scheduled to come back to you probably in January or at the latest February and bring that project specifically to you. I know that that those have been concerns on Lincoln with both it's supposed to be more of a shared street idea where, you know, the parking to some degree remains and bicycles have a slower, so it's slower speeds and other sort of things to slow traffic and make it more of a local street. So I don't think they're looking to remove all the parking, but I should let them come to you in January or February and go through that in more detail. And I also will tell you that this is, since this map is a it's kind of your roadmap for your community, you know? And so if something changes on Lincoln, we can certainly adjust this roadmap. Okay, so don't think this is set in stone. This is an opportunity to kind of identify all the things that we want to happen, but to adjust them as we go as well. So it's a little bit of a living map if we need it to be. So know that it will adjust as conversations about Lincoln and 45th continue.
Great. And Beth, Brad has another, he put a question.
Okay.
in. Brad, go ahead and ask Beth if you like.
Sure, I get, and it dropped off there, so I don't see it again. I guess I'm looking at a network, but where, I'm always asking, where are people going and how are they going to get there? So, we can build any kind of network for bike and ped, but is it going to take them where they want to go in an easy and simple fashion? And so I just don't know if we have that kind of like mission in Globeville or, built into this, like, well, where are people going and where do they want to ride their bikes to and from or walk to and from? And so you can build a map with orange lines and green lines and stuff, but it doesn't really start communicating where people are going to go or where they want to go.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping, I think that we are tying this to that, to those desire lines, if you want to call it that. I think that when a lot of this, there's a station, if we just do a sweep through transit stations, for instance, does this improve the options for folks to travel along safe and comfortable streets, connect across 44th Avenue and reach the transit station? So yes, that would be, and can you now do that, for instance, from the northern portions of the neighborhood all the way down? So that's kind of part of that thinking. Could you move east-west to National Western Center and to that station area? So yes, with 51st, and Fernando, you might have to scroll a little bit, but with 51st and the connection of 51st to Lincoln, yes, those arrows would take you east-west through the site, either to the trail or to recreational opportunities or to the transit station. So I think when we look at this, we try to think about, are there roads that are linking you to be able to move between what are kind of currently quadrants of the neighborhood because of the highways? And can we overcome those so that you can move amongst the neighborhood and to different places? So there's a lot of different destinations. Some of them are parks, some are recreation, some are train stations, some are schools. And so I think if you start to look at this map, you'll see that most of these lines all intersect with all of those types of locations, like Garden Place Elementary. Maybe we come to that circle there, Fernando, let's talk about that part of the world, because this is one of those places that is really tricky. 44th, building on the connection and the improved sidewalks across 44th, and it ties over to potential future improvements in the Fox area and to the station. This becomes a kind of a nice connection, right? A local neighborhood connection that I think people have asked for bike or for sidewalk improvements on, specifically because it is a local street and comfortable. One of the things that's come up is, if you look, we get ourselves over to 38th or Washington there, and we can't really get to the park on the other side. We're kind of hemmed in there. And so one of the things we've talked about and just currently have a big circle around is, could we look at future green space in that area there near the street? And could we look at tying in distinctly to Washington or 38th right there? And I know that that's a pretty big difference in elevation. So it would require some design to bring a path or trail down that could tie in with the Washington Street area there, and then be on the sidewalk. But I think that, for instance, is something that we might want to keep in our visionary longer term ideas. And as money becomes available or different projects get completed and we're looking to the next ones, this is a connection that would provide an opportunity to get both to Washington and 38th and travel south down to what is now part of the Globeville Landing Park, a new 22-foot wide South Platte River Trail that will be going in as part of the levee project, and access along the future, we'll call it walkway of Ringsby Court there in front of the levee improvement projects there too. So it kind of is a great and local connection to a lot of the improved park and green space that will be taking place there eventually here as this all comes together. So that's another one that is just, I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts or feelings around that in particular? Just that sort of east-west and ability to tie to the river and the trail and the park, and in theory, back up toward the triangle. Okay. If you follow Ringsby Court along, and if we are able to get those types of pedestrian comfortable improvements implemented along Ringsby in coordination with the levee, then we sort of have a circle there around the 35th bridge. And I don't believe right now that anything's happening with that. I might be wrong, so please correct me. But this gives you the opportunity to see how that starts to pull everyone, you know, from north of 70 even can come all the way down, tie easily to Washington or 38th there, link to Ringsby and cross over a bridge into the rest of Rhino and the Rhino Art Park, or, you know, travel further down 38th toward the station. So it really starts to open up this whole area to be pretty connected to lots of other parts of Globeville, which are currently, you know, cut by these barriers. So can I ask, does that kind of thing make sense to you guys, or not really, or does that help Brad with the idea that what are we actually connecting to? As we go through it, we can just keep talking through it. But. Okay, well, we have at the southern portion of our page there are two pedestrian bridges that are related to the crossing over the rail line. And so right now, 38th is the main way of walking or biking toward there. And it's, you know, it's tricky. It's narrow and a little dark going under the underpass. And so as some of that Pepsi Center area and different properties turn over, we are showing a green line, dashed green line that brings you to the bridge there. And again, don't know if that's exactly where that green line lands, but I think it just indicates the desire to create a second connection along the edge of the property that links to the park, that ties to the South Platte River Trail, and that brings you to the bridge. And that bridge crosses you over to the 39th Greenway. So now all of a sudden we have an opportunity to move from Bruce Randall School along the Greenway, up through the park to the trail and into the portions of Globeville to the north. And I should say also, of course, Elyria Swansea, because if you take Brighton and the improvements along Brighton North instead, you'll head to the other side. So maybe we move over there for a second. And this really opens up access to Elyria Swansea as well. Okay, so we have a question. Please be mindful not to shift the center of gravity away from Globeville businesses and then what's the rest of it? Can someone read the rest of that one?
Yeah, let's see, thank you, A. It says we need to be mindful not to shift the center of gravity away from Globeville businesses and into the Brighton Boulevard and associated Rhino Art District concentration. This is an issue both with the design of the connectivity and the routing, and has to be dealt with through signage as well.
Totally. Yeah, so I agree. I think that there is, so when we create these connections, we want it to be interconnected. We want everyone to be able to move between all these locations, which is important. But I do think that Globeville businesses with improvements along Washington, and then now Washington having this additional funding to make this really a nice street, I think that that will help not allow some of that, you know, attention to go elsewhere. I think it will really help the Globeville businesses themselves. And of course, the bridge connections are going to be important as well. But a good point. Okay, and so maybe we just sort of kind of shift over toward Elyria Swansea a little bit to wrap up. And you know, York Street, the lid there at the school, and Clayton Street become two really great streets that really provide that north-south connectivity down to 39th, down to 40th, and then to 39th Greenway. This connection exists now there at Clayton that brings you all the way to the Greenway. So then we kind of start to, and then we have the crossing, the bridge crossing of 47th up there, the pedestrian bridge. And so now as the other side of National Western evolves, and I know there's been a lot of talk around that, but someday that sort of all starts to come together, and you can see that we start to see a reconnected pattern, right? We can go north-south, we can head east-west along 47th toward Betty Cram, toward the bridge, and back over into all the Washington area that we just walked through. So it starts to create a very circular connection pattern that with some improvements and some increased pedestrian improvements especially, but we can kind of start to see how this whole area comes back together. And, you know, not easily, but starts to address some of those barriers. It's definitely hard to make it all work perfectly. Does anybody have other thoughts, or is there anything on this map that you're like, hey, we didn't even do X, Y, and Z. We didn't think about this or that. If we were to ask you to put in the chat, does this look appealing to you, or do you hate it? Tell us what you think. Or are you like, yeah, you know, this is kind of heading in the right direction, or it feels good, or maybe you can just provide some comments in the chat so that we can have some takeaways from this discussion. And if it doesn't feel like it's hitting the mark, or we need to get into some more detail on certain areas, we need to know for sure. So Fernando, maybe you can just zoom out a little bit so we can see the full picture as people are just thinking, you know, does this begin to break down those barriers? Does it start to reconnect portions of the neighborhood? And does it link to places, which I know we don't have on here. We have another map, but it was so many labels, I couldn't handle it. But kind of trying to identify, like you were saying, Brad, what are those places that we're now able to tie to? What all can we actually get to? Whether they're parks, recreation, trails in green space, or schools, transit stations, shopping, and future businesses. I think some of that future business opportunity is kind of part of this thinking as well.
Yeah, hey Beth, it's Anthony.
Yes.
Garcia had a comment before he had to leave. He said these are very exciting updates. The level of connectivity envisioned here is truly transformational for residents and business owners. He agrees with AE regarding the importance of strategic signage.
Okay.
And then one other comment. I hope it's okay to read from A. It says, I need to think through the actual experiences of moving along those paths and roads and the network. We'll have access to the PowerPoint and the recording pretty quickly, right? Yes, absolutely, A. Within the next couple of days, we're discovering some challenges with city technology, with recordings and posting on our Washington area program of projects website, but I can absolutely email the presentation to you and the recording within the next couple of days for sure.
Yes, and I love that. I do want you guys to think about this, because improvements along Washington will make Washington much more friendly. Okay, so that will be great, and that will help businesses in the area. But it is important to think, what are your alternatives to moving through this neighborhood or these neighborhoods, this whole area, that maybe doesn't require you to walk along Washington, because it's still going to be a busy street, So that's kind of, some of these are getting at, are there other ways we can move through the neighborhood, or do we need to show some additional ways, especially on the Elyria-Swansea side, that might be alternatives to walking along the busier streets? So think that through for sure.
Great. And then I want to just be mindful of time. We have about 5 minutes left. Oh, and then she just said, please email.
Everyone. Yes.
Yep, of course. It will go to all of the CAG members.
Yes. And I would love to just remind you, you can email me directly with your ideas. That was absolutely, you can email Anthony. You can, whatever works for you. And we're open to this for a while. And I'm going to try this week to find a way to get this map posted on the website, that in a way that allows you to put in comments directly on the website as well. So this is open for you guys to think about and play with for a while. We're not in a rush, So please know, and please share with anybody else that you think would have ideas. So that this will be sort of a road map for us as we go. Yes, I can put my email in the chat, or Fernando, I can't get to the chat, but Fernando, will you put both our emails in there? So yeah, feel free to just get a hold of us, and we'll kind of
I'll put your email there.
Okay, thank you.
And it looks like Mickey raised his hand.
Okay.
There hasn't been much discussion on how this all connects to the CSU campus, and wondered if there could be more detail.
Yeah, that would be that's great. We haven't dealt with that too much.
How the two are really, I think it's a critical part of how the whole area develops, is to make sure that's an integral part of the whole thing. And not having heard the words, I am concerned.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mickey. We are working with NUCO, and in fact, Anthony and I are going to be working with them even more here coming up in the new year. But you're right, we have not really we've sort of just used the main connections in the National Western area to show that that is part of it. But I think you're right, we could add some detail in talking with CSU to how that people should move around and what connections there'll be, and what those destinations will be specifically.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
Great. Okay, Beth, if you want to go ahead and we'll just go to the last slide and wrap up the meeting. If we
Yes. Okay. So Fernando, yeah, perfect. And I will let me.
Great job. I really appreciated that whiteboard that you were able to produce tonight. That was really very helpful at just enlarging the size of what was there. For me, I mean, it was very helpful because I could read it, and as you were speaking, to be able to highlight what you were referencing was really good. So just thank you for
Good. I'm glad. This was such a hard project to share with you guys virtually online here. it really needs a room when a big math, and so we can talk, right? So that's good. I'm glad it was better than just the PowerPoint.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, let me
And-
flip us forward.
Yep. So I think if anyone has any community announcements now would be a good time to do so. If you do, let us know. And then as we look ahead, the CAG process has been in existence for a year this month. And we are going to host some community conversations, one-on-one conversations with several community members just to get a sense of, is this process beneficial? The cadence of meetings, just really some in-depth conversations with community members, just to make sure that as we move into 2022, maybe it doesn't make sense to host a monthly CAG meeting. I don't know, but I'm not going to make that. I and OCBE, we are not going to make that decision for the community. I think it's a good time. I think it's very important to evaluate your work and to hear what works and what doesn't work for community. And so we do know that more than likely we will host our a meeting on January 26th because we do have some updates to share with community. Beth mentioned the bikeway projects, I believe. And just so for now, we'll put a placeholder for that January. It's the 4th Thursday of the month. So right now that day would be January 27th. But again, we want to look at what's working and what's not. And A just asked a question, what is the process for recruiting and selecting neighborhood members? I lost the rest of that. Let me get there. Whose conversations you will be posting? I wasn't going to post any conversations, but the conversations we're going to have are with CAG members. And what we were thinking was some of the CAG members who have attended most of the meetings, and then some CAG members who have not. And just as a starting point for a conversation to, you'll hear from probably about 10, I would say, conversations. We have about 25 members of the CAG, but I think probably at least a good 10 conversations. I was thinking of a focus group. I don't want to do that because then some people that are quiet may not speak up. And I think it's just really important. So I'm going to sort of rely on our CAG membership list to host those conversations. And again, it by no means doesn't mean that that's just the end of it. It's just, I will definitely share what people, as long as people are comfortable, will share what their feelings were.
Yeah, and Anthony, I might just add for everybody on the call that, next year is a new year, and I know we had some interest by some members that we have more, some more, low neighborhood level conversations, have a chance to really talk to people. I know we've been virtual for a long time, and this gets challenging after a while. And so we're really hoping to be able to bring some of that next year and really open up some more conversations. So just kind of know that is important.
Great. Okay. All right. Well, I want to be mindful. It's a little after 7. I want everyone to have what's remaining of their evenings to maybe enjoy dinner or time with family or work or whatever, however you would spend your evening. But just know that we will get the PowerPoint presentation and the recordings out to you, to the CAG members, and then other community members that join the meeting tonight that maybe weren't, they weren't on the CAG list. I'll make sure to send this information to them as well. And then we will continue to stay in touch as we begin 2022 and hit the ground running in January of 2022. Oh, and we are capturing all of your comments in the chat, and I will absolutely make sure to incorporate those ideas for sure. Always appreciate your input, very valuable for sure. So, okay, everyone, have a wonderful holiday season, and we will be in touch again. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Beth or Fernando.
All right, thank you all.
Have a good night.